What is going on, my friend? It is Danny here from projectmanaverse.com, real world IT technical project management for beginners. In this video, I'm going to share with you 3 pro tips for managing your project risks. So I'll briefly explain what project risks are. I'll tell you why you should care about project risks and how to manage them as a project manager. And then I'll go into the actual 3 pro tips. So let's jump into the video. So first of all, what is a project risk? Well, a project risk basically describes something that could go wrong on your project. And a risk will describe exactly what could happen and how likely it is that thing could happen. And when I say something could go wrong, it means there's going to be a negative impact to your project, either in terms of timescales and delivery or cost or potentially quality. Those are the 3 big categories. There could be other impacts as well, but those are the 3 big ones. So a project risk will try and describe and capture something that could go wrong on your project. And if that thing does actually occur, then that risk is no longer a risk. It's happened. It now becomes an issue. So you need to manage your issue instead of the risk now. So that's what a project risk is. They are ubiquitous across project management. Every project manager will be expected to manage risks. And that is why you should care as a project manager about how to manage risks, because there's no escaping it. It's part and parcel of any project, managing your risks. You're going to be expected to know how to do it, and it pays to know how to do it as well, because if you do manage your risks correctly, it can actually increase the chances of a successful delivery, and it can genuinely stop things from going wrong on your project. Not everything going wrong, but many things from going wrong. So that's what a project risk is, and I've briefly explained why you should care about it as a project manager. So let's get into the meat of the video. What are my 3 pro tips for managing requirements? So let's start from the beginning. Pro tip number 1, when you're writing and capturing your risks, try and be very clear with the language and try and write it in a way that anyone would understand, even if they're not an expert in that particular field of industry, whatever your project is about. If it's finance, if it's computing, whatever, try and make it quite general, the risk, in terms of keep it very high level and try and write it in a way that many people can understand it, because these risks get communicated to many people, to many stakeholders of the project. And if you're in your own frame of mind and just writing it in a way that you think only your project team would be reading it, that can lead to people misunderstanding the risk and not being clear, which ultimately comes back to you because you'll be asked for more explanations and you have to keep going back and revising it. So try and be very, very clear, write it in a way that anyone would understand and keep it very high level. And when you're writing it, say what the risk is, and always use this at the start of the sentence. There is a risk that, and then write the risk on there and then follow up with the impact. So if this risk happens, this is the impact, and why should we care about it? So if something happens, what is the problem with it happening? If you stick to that general formula, you should be fine, and people should generally understand what the risk is about. So that's pro tip number 1. Try and write it in a way that anyone could understand and get a good decent sense of what the problem is or what the problem is going to be. So that's pro tip number 1. Pro tip number 2 is try not to raise too many risks on your project. I know it can be tempting to try and capture every little thing that can go wrong, especially if you're new to project management. But after a while, you get a sense of how many things will actually go wrong and I suppose the genuine likelihood of that thing happening. So don't go crazy with writing too many risks. And to be able to do that, try and keep the risks unique to your particular set of circumstances on that project. Try not to raise general risks that could apply to any project. So things like, there's a risk we might not finish testing on time, or there's a risk we might run out of money, that could apply to any project. Don't raise those if there's not really a very high chance of them happening. Try and keep them specific to your set of unique circumstances. And as a general rule of thumb, I'd say about 5 or 6 project risks for a medium-sized project. Say your project is about £1,000 of budget to £1,000,000 and it's about a year-long project, at any one time, you probably don't want much more than 5 or 6 risks raised. And that's a good general rule of thumb, because if you have too many risks raised open, for example, let's say you have 20 risks open, that is a big overhead on you because you'll need to update them frequently and you'll be asked for updates on them. And it's just an admin overhead that you could do without. You could better spend your time on other things. So try and keep them down. I know it's easier said than done. I remember when I did my first big project, I had a risk workshop and we brainstormed all the risks. And I ended up opening about 30 risks, which is way too many to manage. So keep it down if you can. Okay, that's my my pro tip number 2 for managing risks. So pro tip number 3. Pro tip number 3. What was my pro tip number 3? So I've talked about don't raise too many risks. I talked about keeping it general. Oh yeah, pro tip number 3 is a big one. So try to proactively manage the mitigation of your risks. And that may sound obvious, but I say it because not many project managers will actually do that. Unfortunately, keeping a risk log and managing risks has become something of a tick box exercise in the industry. So we'll raise our risks, we'll put them in a log, and once we've got them on there, it's almost like okay, just need to update the commentary every couple of weeks to tell the people or tell the audience or the stakeholders if that risk has actually occurred, rather than really trying to stop that risk from happening, which you can do in many cases. So once you've got your risk raised, don't just keep it in the log and almost forget about it. Get your team together, spend some time on it, and really think, right, how could we stop this risk from occurring? What are all the things that we could do? And really, really challenge yourself. If we had to find a way of stopping this risk from happening, what would we do? And you might actually come up with a few strategies. And once you have those ideas, make sure you translate them into a tangible action and you have a specific owner for that action and a deadline to achieve it. And then chase up those actions and make sure they are completed. Be like a dog with a bone. That's how you manage risk properly. Really try and reduce the chance of them happening. You might not reduce it to like 0%, but you might bring down those chances, and that is what you want. So that's another reason why you don't want too many risks open, because you don't have time to do that exercise with every single risk if you have 20 risks open. But if you have a handful that you can really properly manage, then that's the way forward. Do that. And as a bonus, if you have time, you want to really get a good plan in place, a mitigation plan if the risk actually does occur. So if the thing actually happens, what are you going to do about it? What is your action plan? Because if the risk occurs, you don't want to be in a situation on that day when you think, oh my God, it's happened. What do we do? What do we do? You want a step-by-step plan of action to be able to deal with it if it does actually happen, so you're ready to go. Otherwise, people will start asking questions as to why you weren't ready for it, especially as you had the risk open on your log to begin with. So those are my 3 pro tips for managing risks. So I'll do a quick recap and then we'll end the video. So first of all, what is a project risk? It's basically a description of anything that could go wrong on your project, which has a fairly likely chance of actually happening. Now you can actually, you will be expected to give a score in terms of how likely it is to occur. We usually have high, medium and low, but that's basically what a risk is. It's what could go wrong on the project, and it's generally anchored around an impact, cost, time or quality. You should care about this because all projects will have a risk log. It's standard stuff in project management and you'll be expected to do it, and it will actually help you with your project delivery if you do it properly. Now, the 3 pro tips. Number 1, when you're writing your risk, make sure you do it in a way that anyone could understand, not just people that are specialists in their project that you are doing. So keep it high level, keep it very simple, and always start your risk with, there is a risk that, say what the risk is, and then say what the impact is, and then say the so what. So what? Why do we care? Why should people care if this risk occurs? And it's usually the ultimate impact is you're not going to go live on your planned go live date, or it's going to cost more money or something along those lines. That's the ultimate down the line impact. It always comes back to that. So that's pro tip number 1. Pro tip number 2, don't raise too many risks. Have about 5 or 6 per project. course, there's always exceptions. Don't be too rigid with that, but just don't open too many. Stay away from generic risks that can be applied to any project. That's just more arse covering than actually trying to communicate real risks on the project and leaving yourself open with only things that you can proactively manage. So pro tip number 3, what was pro tip number 3? Oh, sorry, yes, of course. Proactively manage your risk. Really try to find a way to mitigate the risk and reduce the likelihood of them occurring. Spend some time with your team, really think about it, get an action plan together and put it into action, and make sure you follow up on every single point that you raised and all the actions around getting that risk likelihood reduced. And if you have time, as a bonus, do prepare a plan in case the risk does actually occur, so you're ready to go and you're not running around like a headless chicken if it does actually occur. Okay, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Until the next time, please take care.